Before we begin writing stories, we begin thinking in stories. I think that happens early in childhood. It is looking at what is going on and trying to explain to yourself what is happening. It is also at some point in child saying, that wasn't fair. What if it had been this way? It should have been this way. Those are the beginnings of stories. At some point, you learn to read and you learn to write. I think almost every single writer loves to read. And suddenly you decide with great delight you want to try to write a story. Later on, you might write a story, typically, that is based on something everybody likes. And that's common. You try other people's voices. But then there comes a point when you are a serious writer and you want to speak in your voice. You want to write stories that are original. Isn't that the point? Your voice is going to determine the kinds of stories you want to tell. When I first decided to be a writer, the two questions that mattered the most to me is what is voice and what is story, and which determines which. Did voice come first, or was it the story came first? And I realized after writing for a while that voice is basically your mind, your consciousness, everything that happened to you up until this point from your birth. It is the way that you think. And in terms of a story, it becomes the guide that you give the reader into the world you are going into. It is the things that you choose to observe, the things that you see as conflicted or contradictory. So many people say you need to find your voice as a writer. And basically what they're talking about is what is true to you as a writer? What makes you different and unique from every other writer? That is what's going to speak to somebody. It's going to speak to the editor, the publisher, the people who want a voice that is like no other voice out there. So that's a given that you must keep looking for your voice, your particular consciousness, your beliefs, the stories you find interesting for a particular reason. And then there is the voice of the narrator. Now, that is not necessarily the same thing, meaning what the narrator says is not necessarily what you're going to say, but you have thrown that narrator into a situation that may be one that you want to examine. So your desire to examine that situation is your voice. That's your consciousness. That's your guide to the stories you want to tell. My voice, I would say, is the same as consciousness, my own consciousness. It includes beliefs and how I came to those beliefs. They're not beliefs that were handed to me. They were beliefs I struggled to find, often through difficulties and challenges. My voice includes everything that has been traumatic, for example. It does not include, in terms of my writer's voice, the happiest moments necessarily, not the birthday parties. It would be those moments that caused me to question myself. And so my voice continues to be enriched, and that's what will happen to you. As you start to recognize what things from your past, what questions you've continued to ask, what kinds of moral dilemmas you've been in, and your judgments on moral inexactitude and other people. Those are the things that you will bring into the story. No one can tell you what those are, just as no one can say who you really are. That's why writing is so exciting, because it is that communication with yourself as you write the story of what feels right. What do you know? And you're not going to know what you know. until you get into the story and suddenly it becomes clear and you say, that is a truth. And ironically, it's a truth that you find in fiction. There's a particular saying that I think is very useful, and it's something I wrote down when I first started writing, and I said, I don't ever want to forget this, because this is, in a way, the key to finding my voice. It is by a Zen Buddhist named Shunryu Suzuki, and it's from a book called Beginner's Mind, and it says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the experts, there are few. So you never want to become too much the expert and say, I know how this is done. I wrote this story. I learned this. I'm going to do the same thing with this story. No. Each story is different. You have to be the beginner all over again. And that is what's going to leave you open to discovering something new. And in fact, the most exciting, the most worthwhile and meaningful part of writing fiction is going to be the surprises, the surprise discoveries you come upon, and what you might call epiphanies. You have to work at it and let it just arrive. When I was first learning about my voice, there was a wonderful screenwriter named Gil Dennis, and he did an exercise with a group of us who were taking a screenwriting class. And one of the questions went like this: when was a time when you thought you were going to die? And we sat around and we thought for a while, and then we wrote down our answer. And he said, now I want you to get rid of what you've just written down. Probably you put down you were in a car accident, almost in a car accident, or you almost went over a cliff while riding a bicycle. Put that aside. Really think deeply. Think about a moment when you thought you were going to die. You put something down. I think I put down that I went down a ski slope. I went out of control. It was a cliff. I almost died. I thought I was going to die. I screamed, "Mama!" And I landed up okay. I didn't say this aloud. And he said, without anybody revealing what they said, now I want you to throw that away and really think about a moment when you thought you were going to die. And suddenly this moment came up to me. I had not thought about in 25 years. I was 16. I was in Switzerland, where my mother had us moved to after my father and brother died. She had tried to get me to break up with this man, this older man. He was 24. I was 16. She could not get me to stop. She could not get me to understand the danger. And she greeted me with a cleaver in her hand. She took that cleaver and put it right up against my neck, and she backed me into the bedroom, and she said, enough. Enough. I'm going to kill you first, and then I'm going to kill myself. I could see in her eyes that she meant it. She had this glaze like she was no longer there. But I was an angry teenager, and I said, do it. Do it right now. And her eyes became more wild. And then this voice in me came out. And I said, I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. what I felt at the moment when I said those words, when I first said those words, was a betrayal of whatever consciousness had said, I want to live, had betrayed me because I was a tough teenager. And yet that had come out. The moment before I said that was the moment that I knew I did not want to die. That was a time when I almost thought I was going to die. Now, hopefully you haven't had an experience where somebody you love has put a knife to your throat. But that is the kind of trauma, the kind of extreme that you need to look at, the edges of your life, the things that are difficult to remember and to look at. You want to know what it means. What made you say, I want to live? So I hope you can see that what I'm aiming for are those moments that forced you to survive in a way. Survive in the way that is crucial, not just physical, but in an existential form of the essence of who you are. That's what you want to get to. You can try it with happy moments, but I don't think you're going to get as much information. What was the happiest time I was? You'd probably come up with the birth of a baby, a wedding day, the day somebody asked to marry you, the day you were liberated, the day you got out of jail. It would be a little more limited in what you can discover. The difficult questions really are the ones that are going to bring out who you are and what's in your voice. So the more questions you ask in your life, the more knowledge you have to recognize your voice.